Ukrainian Air Force has launched another airstrike in Russia's Kursk region. The footage was shared on Telegram channels. A MiG-20 fighter jet belonging to the Air Force struck warehouses where various types of drones and their spare parts were stored with the French-made AASM Hammer bomb, which is distinguished by its high accuracy. As a result, an explosion occurred in the warehouses, and the drones located there were destroyed. It should be noted that recently, the Ukrainian Air Force has increased its airstrikes on Russian army positions in Russia and occupied Ukrainian territories. These strikes are usually carried out with Western-made bombs, which are distinguished by their high accuracy and are provided to Ukraine as part of military assistance.
Ukraine is bracing for a new major offensive from Russia as Moscow's forces step up attacks on Ukrainian positions. Kiev says Russian reserves are being stockpiled in preparation for another major assault, the Telegraph reports. However, analysts say Vladimir Putin's ambitions to seize new territory before a possible peace agreement are unlikely to be realized. The reason is numerous problems, weak organization and a lack of equipment in the Russian army. Observers note that the Russian troops have almost exhausted their reserves of tanks and armored vehicles. Even with small tactical successes, Russia will not be able to use them due to limited resources. Additionally, Ukraine's ability to strike accurately with drones makes it difficult for Moscow to deploy significant forces to the front lines, making a major breakthrough unlikely. Dmitry Zmylo, executive director of the Ukrainian Center for Security and Cooperation, told The Telegraph, "For now, any Russian offensive on the front lines is impossible. Russia has no major military victories on the front lines, so they want to create the impression that there are huge movements and advantages. We do not see this on the ground." Last month, Volodymyr Zelenski and G7 leaders warned that Russia was planning new attacks, particularly in the direction of the Sumy and Kharkiv regions, which could give Putin an advantage in future negotiations. Ukrainian Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky confirmed that offensive actions have already begun. The intensity of Russian attacks has increased significantly. Meanwhile, Kiev is trying to keep the world's attention focused on the situation in Ukraine despite the absence of a peace agreement on Donald Trump's agenda. However, John Hardy, Deputy Director of the Russia Program at the Foundation for Defense and Democracies, is convinced that the increase in attacks will not lead to significant success. What we are seeing is just a surge in the tempo of the assault. It is a very small scale. They can punch a hole in the Ukrainian line, but they are not able to punch that hole and achieve a rapid, operational, significant breakthrough. The Sumy region, where Ukrainian troops are regrouping after rapid Russian advances in the neighboring Kursk region, is considered to be the most potentially vulnerable. One Ukrainian soldier who fought near Kursk told The Telegraph that the retreat had been taking place overnight in small groups. A lot of equipment was left behind, he said. Hardy notes that attacks are mostly carried out by small groups without significant technical support, as resources are limited. Company-sized attacks, about 100 soldiers, are rare. Over the past year, Russia has lost about 3,000 tanks, 9,000 armored vehicles, and at least 13,000 artillery systems. Hardy says, if you look at what's left in the warehouses, especially what's serviceable, the stocks are getting pretty low. I expect that by the end of this year, they'll be very hard-pressed to continue the war. They'll be completely depleted. Russia has the advantage of numbers. Putin recently signed a decree calling up another 160,000 men. However, as Hardy notes, these recruits receive minimal training, often no more than a month. This is a conscious choice that Russia is making to keep the pressure on Ukraine, to throw these troops into the meat grinder without wasting time on restoring the quality of forces while the war continues. Ukraine's main task now is to prevent a large number of Russian troops from concentrating in one place, which could become a prerequisite for a breakthrough. The use of drones plays a key role in deterring the aggressor. Hardy says Ukraine is expanding its best drone units and, in general, is relying on unmanned systems to make up for shortcomings in other areas. They have adapted well to the way Russia fights, the expert said. The participation of Chinese citizens in the Russian war against Ukraine is not a big surprise. It is known that China is not interested in the collapse of the Russian state as a result of military defeat in Ukraine. This opinion was voiced in an interview with I Don't Know. There are probably thousands. We just don't know about it yet. I mean, as always happens in these wars, people from other countries join one side or the other for different reasons. Just like many Europeans, even Americans, who are fighting on the side of Ukraine. These are soldiers from Belarus who are fighting with Ukraine against Russia. But what's more important, I think, is that China is providing material support to Russia, which allows them to continue to fight, the retired general said. At the same time, Hodges pointed to the strange situation that has arisen after Donald Trump imposed protective tariffs on Chinese goods and did not impose a single tariff on Russian ones. There's this weird triangle where China is helping Russia. The Trump administration is putting a lot of pressure on China, but not putting pressure on Russia. To me, that suggests the Trump administration doesn't have a coherent strategy or interest in helping Ukraine defeat Russia. I can't see what the strategy is, the former commander of the US Army in Europe admitted. On Radio Liberty by the former commander of the US Ground Forces in Europe, Ben Hodges. China does have an interest in how things play out, and I don't think they have any particular attachment to Russia, but they do have an attachment to Russian oil and gas. And they want to be able to move through the Arctic, so I think they would rather have the status quo with Russia than see the collapse of the Russian regime or the Putin regime, he said. Hodges did not dare to give an assessment of the format in which the Chinese are fighting for Russia, as individual volunteers or as entire units, like the DPRK soldiers, despite the fact that China supplies Russia with dual-use components, supports its economy with energy purchases and spreads propaganda blaming Ukraine and NATO for the war. Its leadership officially declares neutrality and avoids direct military intervention. Writes The Economist. There is no evidence yet that Chinese citizens fighting in Ukraine on Russia's side are doing so with state support. However, the media reports that their presence is not surprising. Chinese fighters on both sides of the conflict regularly post videos of their actions on social media. Those who fight for Russia say they are looking for thrills and high wages. Some are driven by nationalism. For example, a 23-year-old from Gansu province said he flew to Moscow in 2023 after seeing a video on social media promising high pay. He had previously worked as a firefighter for 3,000 yuan or $400 a month. As a mercenary, he could earn 5 times that. Another fighter, calling himself Red Macaroon on Douyin, said he wanted to get a taste of war after being inspired by chauvinistic Chinese films. He chose the Russian side because it was easier to get a visa. Zhao Rui, 38, a native of Chongqing, joined the war because he wanted to fight the Japanese if they supported Ukraine. He was reportedly killed in 2023 by a Ukrainian drone. Most Chinese fighters have one thing in common: regret. For example, before his death, Zhao posted a video on Douyin calling on his compatriots not to come. Find a job in China, you will earn the same. Mercenary Zhu Ziqiang said that the Russians don't consider them human, while Red Macaroon said that the Russians were using them as cannon fodder. For complaining about poor equipment, the latter, for example, was put in a pit with deserters.